welcome to Backboard Banter on the board with your hosts Matt Middleton and Kevin Rayner, where the banter's as ferocious. LeBronny James Jr.'s dunk on that U18 French team, man, that was vicious with the left hand or with the right hand.
He's
Left
got to
hand?
do. I think it was the right hand. I think people were clowning him, saying his dad would have done it with the left hand. You know how the world is these days. But he's got to do something to get his draft stock up. Got to land right in the perfect spot so the Lakers can get him in a couple years.
Yeah, exactly. With LeBron's extension, man, he's got to go to the Lakers at this point because LeBron James can't leave now at this point.
I mean, it's crazy to think about. The guy's going to be making over $50 million a year at almost 40 years old. Like, still one of the best players in the world, so he deserves his money. But, man, what a longevity. What a craziness that is LeBron James.
Dude, he is... he's the GOAT. You know it. One player, start your team. I'm sorry, Michael. Just one player. Give me LeBron James. Every day, all day. I don't even care.
One of these days, we'll get back into the GOAT debate. Whenever LeBron retires, we'll have to figure it out again, Matt. But, I mean, we could return to our takes. They're all just sizzling. They're waiting for next season. Not really much to say this week about them.
Well, I mean, once we do the Atlantic preview, it's going to become very painfully obvious to Knicks fans that they're definitely going to miss the playoff. So, I mean, we're doing others before we get there. I think we wanted to save the Atlantic for the last. So, before we get into the Southwest Division, man, did you want to talk anything about the NBA before?
I mean, I'm just pumped that we got the schedule released. I know that we as NBA fans have just been frothing at the mouth. We need more content. We need information. We're hanging out, watching Ben Simmons in a candy store videos. There's nothing going on right now. But hey, preseason games are going to start at the end of September. Regular season, October 19th is the Raps home opener. So I'm looking forward to a couple of weeks. We got 8 weeks, 9 weeks now till the regular season?
Yeah, I think only 7 weeks till, preseason starts. So not too bad at this point. We're going to get some NBA games back. But yeah, definitely itching for it. It's nice to have that schedule release though, so that we all know when it's going to happen, man. Did you want to talk any of the games that caught your eye, maybe, or?
I mean, the Christmas games, obviously, they catch everyone's eye. I will say, before talking about the Christmas games, I do want to shout out the NBA because they're limiting back-to-backs this season. There's, some statistics that have been taken up where, since 2014, every team is down 6 back-to-back games. It's 31%. So we're looking out well for the players. I'm excited. The Spurs apparently have a historic amount. Or sorry, not the Spurs. The Clippers. The Clippers have a historic amount of the least amount of back-to-backs ever. So the league really looking out for Kawhi Leonard and his needs. But I think that with 2,000 miles less traveled on average for each team this season, that hopefully we can have a healthy basketball season with the best possible games. Because that's what I want. Matt knows, me and injuries, we do not get along.
And honestly, I think over the last 5-6 years specifically, at least from what I remember, is there has been a bigger push to bring the NBA regular season down in games because we're getting all these playoff games and playoff players, like Kawhi, like Paul George, like Anthony Davis, who get hurt once we get there. And, I mean, as basketball fans, we want to see the best players go up against each other. You could say that the last 3 championships that have been won have theoretically had something to do, even 4 championships have had something to do with injuries, right? I mean, you go back to us. If Kevin Durant's healthy, Klay Thompson's healthy, maybe the Raptors don't win. You go back to the bubble. If we don't have that bubble season, there's no chance. There's still a chance that LeBron and AD pull it together. But, hey, man, they'd have to stay healthy through the regular season, which they've shown they can't do. The fact that the Bucks won, again, Anthony Davis injury in the first round to Phoenix. Phoenix goes all the way, loses to Giannis. And
let's
then last
also not
year...
forget, before you go ahead, I want to also mention the Kaminsky injury in that series. The Phoenix Suns were doing so well against that Bucks
the Sarge.
Sarge, yes, exactly.
Because Kaminsky had to play for him.
And then, Kaminsky got eaten alive. But exactly, right? Even in that series alone, there was a defining injury that helped. I mean, Giannis was going to do Giannis things, but still.
And then Chris Middleton this year, Bucks can't get past Boston because of it. Do the Bucks with Chris Middleton beat the Golden State Warriors? My vote is yes. But hey, we never know, right? So I think there's been this big talk about it. So it's really good to see the NBA kind of like really honing in on the back to backs and the less travel, so that they can rest up and get a full season of healthy players. Because it's what we want to see.
Absolutely. The fans want games, the players want games, the owners want games. Everyone just wants the best possible content at the end of the day. But I think it's time, we can talk about the Christmas games real quick. We can laugh about how the 76ers and the Knicks are a rivalry and are going to have a Christmas Day game. But really, it's two good games on the ends and then a couple of games smashed in the middle.
Dude, I just want to touch on the Philadelphia versus the Knicks game. Like, I get that New York is the mecca of basketball. It hasn't been the mecca of basketball for years. Okay, guys. The last time you guys were good, I can't tell you, because that Julius Randle season, that was a mirage. But at the end of the day, it should have been the Raptors, man. The Raptors versus the 76ers on Christmas Day. Pascal Siakam versus Joel Embiid. Literally, Embiid hurts Scotty Barnes, breaks his ankle, and Pascal Siakam breaks his face. Like, what more do you want in terms of rivalry than two teams that just went up against each other in the playoffs, man?
There's a lot of big market favoritism that's happening here. I mean, Bucks Celtics is going to be a great game. Grizzlies Warriors is going to be a great game. Suns Nuggets could have potential to be awesome right in the middle. But Lakers Mavs is, the media narrative of LeBron versus Luka, and then 76ers Knicks is just big market. You got to give a Knicks a Christmas game because everyone in New York wants to watch.
Yeah, it's man, I don't think it's smart by the NBA, but hey, man, if they're gonna do it, they're gonna do what they want to do. Like, there's just like very, very, few and far between like games that I really want to watch on Christmas Day now because of that. So like, I guess I'll tune in for Dallas versus LA, I guess. Because, you're doing nothing else.
You got to watch LeBron continue his streak. This man doesn't get to spend Christmas with his family for another year. It's basically since he was like 18, 19 years old. But when you're the GOAT, when you're that good, that's how it's going to be, man. So, yeah, I'll tune into Christmas games. Let's be honest. It's Christmas time. It's kind of tradition at this point in time. But we will see. Absolutely. Hopefully they won't have to change any around. I'm pretty sure there were major injuries last year, and there was like one game that had to get switched, if I remember correctly. But that's in the past.
Yeah, man, it's in the past. No more COVID, hopefully. Even though, NBA players still can't enter Canada if they're not vaccinated. Keep that going. Let's go. Give us, competitive advantage. But I think, man, we've talked about the schedule a little bit. You want to break down the Southwest teams. That's where we're going to start. Last year, it was like an up-and-coming division. We knew the Spurs were taking a step back. You knew Houston was going to be bad. But you really had three teams who, really thought that they could emerge. And, hey, man, all three made the playoffs. Dallas, New Orleans, and Memphis. I mean, New Orleans snuck in, doing it for your boy. But, hey, they still got there.
It's a fun division at this point in time, right? Because nobody's really thought about the Southwest. Like, obviously, James Harden and the Rockets went on that crazy 8-year stretch where they were the only team that made the playoffs. Sorry, the only team that didn't not make the playoffs. Gosh, really killing it with those words right now. Flowing out of the tongue. But so when you think about this division, you're like, well, we haven't really worried about the Pelicans because besides the Anthony Davis situation and Zion being healthy, they've been not really relevant. The Mavericks were faltering since their 2011 situation, since Dirk, and now that they have Luka, they're back on the table. I mean, do I need to talk about the Grizzlies? It's the same story with Ja, right? And the Spurs are in a rebuild and the Rockets are doing what they do, but there's some fun stuff going on with these five teams, and a lot of the fan bases are probably just itching and waiting for their return to glory because that looks like the roadway for a lot of them.
Well, yeah, and they've got three of the future potential top 10 players in this league. And I mean, between the Spurs and the Rockets, who are both going to be bad this year, one of them could land Victor Wembanyama, who, everybody is, all over. He literally is comparing himself to KD and Giannis. So if the kid's got that kind of mentality, maybe he will be, the number one player in the NBA at one point. But this could be crazy, man. I do want to talk about the Spurs, though. Because I think with Greg Popovich where he is, with this roster where it is, do you think that, like, potentially he should just kind of take a step back and retire? because I think that they've just got to go tank and build a whole new ecosystem around new young players.
I mean, selling DeJounte really proved that this team was ready for their next step, right? Like, obviously, a lot of people will rip on the DeJounte trade and be like, how could you get rid of somebody that good? Honestly, it shows what the Spurs realize where they at, because DeJounte is the type of player that alone isn't going to be enough, right? You have to have enough young pieces in his timeline to make it work, and the Spurs don't really have that at this point in time. I will say congratulations. You got rid of Gallinari. Proud of that organization for that step. Sorry, Danilo, but you will always be, in my firing range at this point in time. Ever since that Mohawk and that decision with the Atlanta Hawks. But yeah, the Spurs, they're looking to the future, right? And I'll bring it up every time. Quinn Snyder might be the replacement for Popovich. It might be time for Popovich to step down. And if they get Wembanyama, maybe Pop finds 10 years of life and is like, ooh, a new rookie that I can take all the way. But the Spurs are ready to reset, and I just don't see any other direction.
Absolutely, man. I mean, you nailed it right on the head with the DeJounte trade. They're signaling that they're going to be a bad team, and I think that's the right decision, right? I think the worst thing that you can do in sports is be mediocre. It's why I'm not so high on the Gobert trade. It's not because I don't think that they're going to be a good NBA team, but mediocre is, hitting the second round, third round. Yes, you're a top 4 team in the NBA, but if you're never going to be there, like at the very pinnacle, the peak, you're in purgatory basically, man. And like at the end of the day, you may as well take a step back, go to the bottom, reload, get your players. Keldon Johnson looks like, he's a good young player. I bet you his stats are going to blow up this year without DeJounte Murray. He's going to be a great fantasy basketball player. I hate that I gave you that advice, but, he's going to be like a low round pick that is going to pop off this year is what I believe. But the Spurs are going to be bad. And I think that's exactly where they need to be. I think, this roster, they added some decent players in the draft. I don't love Jeremy Sochan, but when the Spurs are drafting, I kind of think that they're gonna hit on their players. Like DeJounte was a late round pick; he was picked after Pascal. Keldon's a late round pick. They're able to draft and develop really well. It was the model organization for the last 20 plus years, especially when they had Tim Duncan, right?
They have so much history behind them, and that's why you believe in their success. And to get a top 10 pick, there's hope, right? But you have to just look at the teams around them as well to see the direction that they should follow, right? Look at the Rockets and their young picks. They're not relevant yet, but if they could add a Wembanyama to a Jabari Smith and a Green, like what a big 3 of young kids that is a DeJounte plus friends that can take you all the way. Ja Morant, how early was he? Luka arguably should have been the number 1 pick, right? Zion, the number 1 pick. So, yeah. I mean, all you have to do is look around you to see that, the Spurs, they're not the team in this division anymore. They are ready to rebuild, and if they can land more studs, I mean, the future is up for them.
Yeah, man, because, you land that one franchise-changing player, and then you become the Dallas Mavericks, right? Like, a team that goes to the Western Conference Finals on the back of, I would argue he is a top 5 player at worst. In the NBA, and it could easily have the most talent in the NBA currently. Man, who else are you picking a team to build around at this point? Give me a player.
I don't even know. I give you Ja, I give you Luka, I give you Giannis because he's still kind of young. But that's the thing, right? Like, Luka proved himself. He had a Jordan-esque, a LeBron-esque run early in his career. He finally got over the demons of facing the Clippers in the first round, and we were happy. We love Luka on this podcast. We're excited for the Mavericks. Now we have to talk about their direction and where it will go, because most importantly, Boban is gone. The smiling face, the happy tall giant is gone, and everyone's sad about it. But
yeah,
let's not forget he takes up a roster spot, and his usefulness, well, it does exist. It is very limited. So, let's talk about the other big that has joined this roster. Let's talk about Christian Wood, a player who is good, maybe could be great, and will definitely benefit from a player like Luka to raise his ceiling to be greater than good. But will he be enough? Is it just going to be another Kristaps situation? Like, the Mavericks have really got to figure out who's going to run with Luka, because if they don't, man, kind of crazy to think about.
It's kind of crazy to think that, Christian Wood is this, he's definitely a scoring upgrade on any of the bigs that they've had over the past couple of years. I mean, Maxi Kleba and Dwight Powell aren't up to his standard, and the Kristaps Porzingis thing it was a failed experiment. The only thing that I can think about, though, is, the Mavericks really started to take off because they started to lean on that defensive identity that they built. Mm-hmm. And with having Luka, who is arguably one of the worst defenders in the NBA, and no offense to Luka, he does a lot on the offensive end. He's got to conserve it on the defensive end, and he looks sometimes lackadaisical and unengaged out there.
Yeah.
Christian Wood is also that type of player. He is also a lackadaisical, non-defensive minded player, not a two-way kind of guy. They're both one-way players. I don't know if that's going to really affect the way that they play, and if they're going to be able to take the leap that they anticipate with Christian Wood, because they're going to be lacking the other side of the floor. Basketball is probably like a 65-35 proposition, but you still got to really, hammer home that 35%. Look at the Celtics, look at the Golden State Warriors, man. The two best defenses in the NBA end up in the NBA Finals.
I mean, he lays it out for us all. Defense wins championships. It will always be a factor. You can't get away from it. But yeah, the Mavericks have to figure it out. And when you throw in Spencer Dinwiddie into that equation and you think about the offensive ball-moving potential, sure. But exactly, you can't forget about the defense. You can't forget about what else will happen. JaVale McGee, going to be a useful player on this team, but also an aged guy, a veteran who knows his stuff. Kind of the replacement for Boban at this point in time. And, I can look to their draft pick in Jaden Hardy. I like the kid. I like his name, 37th overall. I'm pretty sure he fell compared to where he would have been 3-4 years ago, right? So you never know with this Mavericks team. Cuban tends to know what he's doing. He did get Luka. He's figured out his next steps, but, it's the final steps now. They've proven themselves with their run, but I want more for Luka. It makes me sad still, the situation that he's in.
And, like you said, man, Cuban has been very good at getting that piece, right? Like, he got Dirk, he got Luka. What he's struggled with is putting the final pieces around them. Yep. Even with Dirk Nowitzki, I mean, how long was Dirk Nowitzki a top 10 player for the Dallas Mavericks? And they have one championship to show for it. I mean, arguably, it's one of the most historic, amazing championships for one individual superstar to take his team all the way. But, I mean, they only ever got one.
Yeah.
So, are they going to be able to put the pieces around Luka? I think that's, what time will tell. I think having Tim Hardaway Jr. hopefully come back and play will help out. I don't know if they have enough defensive identity anymore. Their offense is going to be fine, but Luka's really got to come in and really show himself on the defensive end.
And to add to that point also, we haven't discussed Jalen Brunson. We haven't discussed, them losing Sterling Brown and Trey Burke. There are some holes to fill. There are new opportunities in this Mavericks team. But at the end of the day, that's what the Mavericks have to figure out. They're rinse and repeating time and time again, and that's kind of what you do with a superstar, right? If it's not working out, you find new pieces and you make it work, because he has the potential. We saw them go as far as they did on the back of one man. I joke about Damian Lillard being the guy that was pushing the rock up the hill by himself. Well, I don't want to start saying it, but Luka is becoming that guy who's pushing that rock up the hill by himself.
Yeah, I think his name is Sisyphus.
Yeah, not me.
Man, and you know what, man? Taking a flyer on the 37th pick, Jaden Hardy, who was the number 2 player coming out of high school, he went to the G League, didn't necessarily pop the way everyone thought he was going to. I think the G League is getting to the point where it's almost harder than college basketball. I think because you've got guys who have two-way NBA contracts, who have played in the league, who maybe could be on an NBA roster, but for whatever reason are playing in the G League, and now you're asking a 19-year-old player who may not be ready to go in and play against them, or an 18-year-old kid,
Yeah.
whereas he could play against the 23-year-olds who are in college basketball and make a big impact. So I think, you know, it's never great to see a player fall that far. There's obviously a reason that he fell that far, but taking the flyer on him, man, if Luka can, help him out, show him a few things, he could be great.
That's the thing, and you have to realize that there are so many paths, right? From the Fred VanVleet paths to the first overall pick path to the Nikola Jokic path, right? Like, there is so many ways to get into the show, to get into the NBA and play their games, and the Mavericks need to find a couple of 16, 17-year-old kids that want to play with Luka, maybe. There's not much more that I need to say about the Mavericks at this point in time. Like, they are what they are. We know what they can be, right? Because of the player like Luka. And until they put it together and start making it working, this conversation is just rinse and repeating itself over and over.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, a team that, we know what Dallas is. We know kind of what their ceiling is at this point, and we don't think it's championship level until they sign that second superstar. I think a team that, could potentially have championship aspirations this year is the New Orleans Pelicans, if everything goes well. I know I've been pushing them for the last 2 years. I've been really high on them. I'm really high on Zion. But I think the fact that they were in the playoffs with CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, and that was the rotation, their main pieces. Now you're adding Zion into that. Come on, man. Jonas Valanciunas, we love Jonas on this show, man. I think, honestly, if they finished ahead of Dallas in this season standings, I wouldn't be shocked.
They are probably the biggest cluster bomb in this group, the biggest unknown, the biggest potential, because as we've seen from Zion, he can be unstoppable. And I'm not even talking what we know he can do, which is being the rim-dominant beast, the Shaq-like monster he can be. Matt, I'll still never forget coming home from the ski hill to watch that first game of his when he hit 4 3-pointers back-to-back, Kid's special. And that team has good quality talent that has proven they can play with each other. So when you add in a potential healthy superstar in Zion, if he can stay healthy, the sky's the limits for this Pelicans team, and I would love to join you on the bandwagon, man. There's a lot of good players that I would love to see find playoff success.
Dude, there's room. There's room. They haven't done anything yet to make it too crowded on the bandwagon, so you're welcome to join, man. I've been really early. You can just be early. But, man, I'm thinking with this kind of roster, Jose Alvarado on defense. I think Dyson Daniels is going to be really good eventually. Definitely worth the top 10 pick. Devontae Graham, I was happy that they picked him up last year.
Yep.
Larry Nance Jr. at some points during the playoffs was one of their most impactful players, just in terms of what he was able to do on the defensive end and all-around game. They've got, we've already mentioned Jonas and CJ and Brandon. They have a good squad, and if they, end up fourth, third in the Western Conference, because Zion's played a full healthy season at MVP level play, because that's basically what he was as a rookie, is MVP caliber play, and Brandon Ingram takes another step, and CJ McCollum is now more integrated. Man, I love this roster. I think it's so good. I just hope that, the Pelicans don't do what the Pelicans do and mess it up.
And to add to that, right, what really gives me confidence is the fact that of all the teams in this division, and also the three-headed top of this division, they have no major losses. They don't have a major bullet out of the chamber that is no longer a part of that team. They only added young kids that could be good, kids that could find room on their roster. The worst thing is that Tony Snell is a free agent still, and maybe they don't need to bring back Tony Snell, right? The Pelicans have created some chemistry last year. They've moved past the Anthony Davis situation. They said, no, Brooklyn, we will not give you Brandon Ingram. He is too good for Kevin Durant. I'm proud of this organization for standing up that way. They see it, right? We as Raptors fans can see what our team is building. And Pelicans fans, I think, are witnessing a similar situation. And they're that close. They're a healthy Zion away, like you said, from making a pretty good playoff run.
And they have the draft capital to be set up for the next decade. If they play it right, they can become one of the model franchises in the NBA. Because not only do they have their own draft picks, they got a heck of a bunch of LA draft picks that they get to use.
Yep.
Like, it's it's ridiculous what this team has in terms of assets to build for the future and how young their players are. I'm pretty sure Brandon Ingram's still one of the youngest players. I think he was the youngest player in that draft, and he's probably 23 at this point.
24, I think.
But he's still so young, man. Like, it's crazy to think that Zion at 21, him at 24, and now they've got Dyson Daniels. A pretty good supporting cast. I think the sky's the limit for them, man, and they just historically haven't been able to do it. And they had an Anthony Davis level player. They had Drew Holiday. They still collapsed that. So
I mean, we were talking, I think, a year or two ago about this idea of when Zion was really hitting his unhealthy phase, right? Of, is this just an Anthony Davis situation? Are we going to rinse and repeat? Is Zion not going to sign it so he can take his qualifying offer and then go where he wants? I mean, a year ago I was talking about how he needs to go to the Knicks and join Cam and RJ. Don't join the Knicks. We know what the Knicks is as a franchise, but yeah, the Pelicans, man, I'm excited for them. I think that they're going to be sneaky good. I think that nobody is thinking about them right now. We talked about Zion's contract and how that's, I think, really going to push him and really help him to be the star that this team needs him to be. And man, wouldn't it be exciting if the Pelicans had a Grizzly-esque season, from last year and just showed up and shocked the world? I would be pumped.
And again, if we were to go back to last season when we were breaking this division down, the conversation wasn't, is Ja better than Zion? It was, is Zion better than Luka?
Yeah.
And at this point, everyone has Ja and Luka over Zion. We'll see, man. A year makes a huge difference in the NBA. So I have full faith that they're gonna pull it together and be one of the top teams in the NBA. But Houston out here, they're definitely sticking to the bottom. I think Jabari Smith is a great piece to add. I think Jalen Green is a great scorer, and he really showed off at the end of last year. But they got to break that roster down and just keep failing for next draft pick after next draft pick after next draft pick, because man, they got nothing else besides those two guys.
I mean, he hits it pretty well there. I do kind of like the Rockets. I think I'm a little bit higher on the Rockets than Matt is, for the simple fact that I think that Jabari Smith is going to fit in well. Jalen Green has proved that maybe he doesn't need to be the ball handler. Maybe he needs to just be a shooter. And if he can turn into a Klay Thompson type player, and Jabari can be a ball handler, and with them no longer needing John Wall, right? And Christian Wood, their main scorer, leaving, there's going to be opportunity. And the nice thing about opportunity when you're on a team that isn't expected to win is that you can take your shots. You can be inefficient, right? And so we're going to get to see a lot from this team, and they are going to lose, but if they could get a Wembanyama, if they can get a top couple of picks over this year, next year, they'll set themselves up for success. But compared to where they were a couple of years ago with James Harden, this is a real fall from grace for the Rockets organization.
Man, it's a hard fall is what it is at this point, man. I mean, I like Alperen Sengun.
Alperen Sengun? That's pretty good, man.
Alperen Sengun. Thanks, buddy. I think, he's got a lot of potential. He's kind of flashing a little bit of baby Jokic stuff, which is it's kind of where the center position is going right now. Is you got to be able to handle the ball a little bit. You got to be able to make passes. You got to be able to hit mid range and play with your back to the basket. You got to be able to do everything. And so he's kind of flashing that potential and ability. I like that. I like Jabari Smith's 3-point shot. It's definitely the smoothest coming out of this draft, and one of the smoothest that we've seen in a really long time coming into the NBA. But again, they're going to need a lot more help in order to build, that young core that the Pelicans have, or the Grizzlies have,
Absolutely.
Or we have. It's going to take a lot. What I'm still shocked about is Eric Gordon still being on this team, man. Eric Gordon's got to get himself onto a contender, because this man is a valuable player. He could help a roster win. Honestly, if we traded Svi Mihailu for Eric Gordon, I would be jumping out of my chair, bro.
For half a second, I forgot Eric Gordon existed on the face of this planet, and then I was like, "He's a great player." Like, you're so right, man. Like, if that's the last thing that we could say about the Rockets, really, is that Eric Gordon, we need to free this man, because otherwise, there's not really much to say about this team. They are in a true hardcore rebuilding situation.
Yeah, if they break 20 wins again this year, like that's their goal, right? So
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, they're not going anywhere. But man, your favorite team, the team that you're repping right now, I mean, I think we got to get to them. I think they're the class of this division at this point. They proved it last year, but I think they're going to prove it again this year. Man, where do you want to start with the Grizzlies? I feel like we talk about them every single week.
I mean, I'll just quickly get it out of the way. You know, John Morant going to have another amazing season. The guy's going to hopefully be in the top 10 conversation, maybe find a little bit of MVP conversation again, but no, I'm getting too far ahead of myself. The really important thing to discuss, Matt, is can they keep this success going? Will Kyle Anderson and D'Anthony Melton, two strong role players that were a part of what was this jawless, amazing Grizzlies team, can they survive without them? Is there going to be enough? Like, can Danny Green rehab and be a good presence? Like, there's so many ways to go, but the most important thing is the Grizzlies need to just find that success from last season and keep it in a bottle and just keep it tucked away, because they can do it again. I really believe it.
Yeah, man, I think, you know, what they did is they lost some fringe depth, and depth was definitely one of their main strengths last year. I mean, I think what were they 24 and like 4 or 7 without Ja Morant, when like he didn't play, and like Kyle Slomo Anderson and D'Anthony Melton are definitely important pieces in those rosters without Ja Morant. But if Ja can stay healthy for the full season, with the continued development of like their current players like Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane, you know, they're still going to be pushing, man. And I think this roster it was built too well at this point to have, you know, I would like, you know, they're rotation level players. I wouldn't call them starters on any team. And they're like maybe the front half of the like, you know, backups in terms of rotation. But like, I don't think that that's gonna be enough to offset them and drop them from what was the second best team in the NBA.
I mean, you pretty much nailed it. And with Taylor Jenkins getting his extension, right? Like, they're set up for success. Now, the real kink is Jaren Jackson's going to be out until November, October, December. We don't really know, but he's not going to be there probably for day one. And momentum is a huge thing in the NBA, especially for young kids, right? And if they get, you know, the teeth knocked out of them at the beginning of the season for the first few weeks, can they ride that momentum on the way back? The reason I say yes is because of a superstar like Ja. He has lightning in a bottle. He has the capability to turn this team around on a dime. And that's why I'm looking at a 50-win season from this team. That's why I'm looking at them continuing their relevance. People are joking about the Grizzlies-Warriors rivalry, and I'm like, yeah, it's a legitimate rivalry. It was a great playoff series, but it's the old versus the new, right? Like, Ja has decided that if Luka is going to be the face of the West, he's going to be right there beside him. And I'm pumped for the Grizzlies to keep it going.
No, man, he's pushing to be, you know, considered one of the, if not the top young player in the West. And, you know, we don't even talk about our favorite Canadians, Brandon Clark and Dylan Brooks.
Yeah.
So, like, I feel like this team is, like, especially when they had D'Anthony Melton and Kyle Anderson, they were like 10 deep, 11 deep in terms of, like, you know, the last 6 guys, maybe they're not starters, but they're front of the end bench guys. Like, you know, they would be on every other team's, you know, 6 or 7 man rotation. Now they're going to have like a 9-man rotation, and is that going to be able to be sustainable? Yes, I honestly believe that. My biggest issue is that, like, Ja has shown that he has some tendency to get hurt.
Yeah.
And that would scare me as a franchise. But you got to live with the good and the bad, man. And this kid plays out of the gym. Like, he is the athletic marvel, the ticket in the NBA when it comes to watching, especially last year. I think Zion might take it back from him this year in terms of being box office. But hey, man, when you got those 2 players, like, but you know, Zion's the guy who's going to take it from you. You ain't doing too bad, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And all things aside, Zion versus Ja would be my favorite dunk contest ever. We'll never see it because they're both so injury prone, so we will never see it. But man, two absolute studs of basketball. And we'll see, man. The Grizzlies have 18 national TV games this year. It is the most in franchise history. Everybody is recognizing what they're here to do, and I can't wait, man. I'm excited for this team, but there's not really much more to say. I mean, Matt knows I'll talk about the Grizzlies every 3 weeks basically on this show. So there'll be more Grizzlies in the future.
Every 3 weeks, bro, you talk about them every day if you can. You wearing the hat, man. You are wearing a Grizzlies hat on our show. So, yeah, man. Honestly, I think this is a really exciting division. At least 3 of the teams, I believe, are definitely going to be playoff contention and maybe even challenge for contender status.
Yeah.
With the Grizzlies losing to the Warriors, with Dallas making the Western Conference Finals and losing to the Warriors, like you could say the 2 of them are already in there, and I think the Pelicans are going to prove this year that they're definitely in that class as well, man. But I think that wraps it up for the Southwest Division, man. I mean, filled with some superstars, could add even more with your bottom feeders, Victor Wembanyama, who knows? Do you want to talk anything else about the NBA, or?
The only thing that I really want to bring up is that apparently the Jazz and the Knicks have renewed their talks for Donovan Mitchell. Do we talk about it? No, not really. Until it actually happens, then we'll break it down. The Jazz are a weird team. Hey, maybe we'll talk about that division next week, but probably not. We probably won't talk about either of these teams next week.
Well, I mean, like, Mitchell's like the biggest trade piece out there outside of Kevin Durant, and I think we talked about it last week. I feel like his market is being held up because Kevin Durant isn't falling, and at the end of the day, like, I think Kevin Durant's going to get less than Donovan Mitchell because he's entering his prime, and Danny Ainge proved with the Rudy Gobert trade that he's willing to hold out for a huge package. So
I showed Austin the trade package just yesterday for Rudy Gobert, and he was like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's why KD hasn't been traded." He's like, makes so much sense now because it is ridiculous. But yeah, nothing's happening until KD gets moved, and KD's probably not getting moved.
Oh, man, it's such a wild thing to think about, man. The fact that he has publicly called out the GM and the coach, the fact that nobody is really willing to offer them, what they think Kevin Durant is worth. But again, like I say this with home prices, man. Like, your house is only worth what somebody's willing to pay you, and Kevin Durant is only worth what the other teams are willing to give you. And like, for them to ask the Celtics for both Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, that's a joke. Like, for them to be so stuck on the fact that we need to give up Scotty Barnes, like, no. And like, the fact that the Pelicans wouldn't give up Brandon Ingram, who I'll take Scotty Barnes over Brandon Ingram any day of the week at this point. And like what are they going to get at this point? Like, just take Pascal Siakam in a first and call it a day. Give us Kevin Durant. We'll win a championship. You can say that you had some kind of part in it. And you guys, they'll probably be the 7th or 6th seed with Pascal Siakam.
It's a wild situation. And when you think about the trade market in general, it really is, you're used to trading for the player. You're used to thinking about the value of the player. But when you get to this level of superstardom that we've seen in the past few years, you're not trading for the player anymore. You're trading more than what that other team over there can trade for the player, because that's where it comes to at this point in time. There's only so many assets the team can hold. We're not all OKC with 18 draft picks to throw around, right? So KD's not getting moved, and at least for the Raptors, I'm happy about that, because the longer this goes on, the more and more I realize that Kevin Durant is not worth it for us.
Dude, no, he's... Unless we're giving up Pascal Siakam in a first round pick, and that's all that it costs us, he's not going to provide us a long, sustainable winning window that we want. And with Pascal, maybe our window isn't as open as it would be with Kevin Durant right now. But I mean, with Scotty hopefully developing into the superstar that we believe him to be, that window is going to be propped up for the next at least 10 years.
Yeah.
So, and if we draft well, if we develop well, I think the sky's the limits for our team, bro.
I mean, I would still take Gary and OG just for the Grievous Vasquez memes. But all jokes aside, we have such a good contract situation for our boys. We've got a great contract in OG and Anobi locked up for years. We've got Boucher on a good contract. Scotty's locked up till 24-25 on his rookie deal. You know, the worst situation we have right now is that Gary and Fred are, you know, coming into player options.
And Pascal.
And Pascal is also getting close. So, like, we have the next year or two to really figure out who matters, what's going to be our important pieces, and who is locked in and ready to stay. And, you know, the mumblings of, you know, the fan base being upset and worried for Gary and the fact that Gary's in a contract year and so he's going to be like, gimme, I want all those shots. Sure, that's what a contract year does to people, but also, like, the mentality that we have as an organization and as a team and the camaraderie that the boys have together, I have hope that that's not going to be the direction that Gary goes.
Well, I think if I'm going to throw it to Precious Achiuwa's agent, who said, you know, what we do as an organization has really enabled Precious to feel supported and to feel like it's a family. I think that'll hopefully help with the whole Gary Trent contract situation. You know, he's going to feel like this is my team. This is where I want to be. These are the players that I want to develop and build what Golden State has done. I think having Golden State as this, you know, model franchise for the last 7-10 years has been perfect for the NBA because it's really driven home the fact that you don't necessarily need to be the biggest market. Yes, California has a ton of people, but San Francisco specifically was not ever really necessarily like the premier market of the NBA. And like Toronto's a big market, but you can develop with your team and then become this, you know, legendary dynasty. And I honestly believe that we have that potential with these players. We can develop, you know, for the next 4 or 5 years and become that juggernaut. Scotty, Gary Trent, Precious, OG, like, and as Pascal and Fred age out, like, hopefully we can, you know, get some new players in. And buddy, I think we talk about this also every week, but at the end of the day, I think next year we're going to be a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference, and for the next 5 years, I don't think we fall below 4th in the Eastern Conference. I'm that confident.
When you talk about our ceiling of potentially a healthy team, of course, anyone who knows anything, right? Like, you think about the number of players that are giving Scotty his due, that are giving Pascal his due even, right, in recent days. We have a lot of good and a lot of potential, and I just want to see positivity. I want to see the boys lock in together and build that chemistry. I want the best of everything, right? I want the Golden State dynasty. I want the Memphis Grizzlies, you know, brotherhood type of situation. Like, I really just want to see more success from this team. And if everyone is willing to lock in and they are willing to throw the contract situation out the window, throw the stats out the window, because the front office has proven that, you know, if you're willing to lock in, play defense, and show up, you're going to get your money. Right? The fact that Fred is going to potentially sign not a max extension, but a max available to him extension because of what he's done for us. And that is the prime example of someone who's an undrafted player who came in, bet on himself, and proved that he was willing to do what it took for the organization. If that's not the best example for Gary, I just don't know what else to say, right?
Yeah, and like you said, man, we've proven that we'll pay you. We've proven that we'll give you what your value is. You know, people would probably say that we overpaid Fred when we signed him. Even when we signed Gary Trent Jr., people were calling that a little bit of an overpayment. I mean, it proved out to be a fabulous contract this year. But at the end of the day, right, like, OG, some people think it's a little bit too high. When we paid Pascal, they said it was too early. But, you know, we've proven that if you're going to be committed to our organization, we will commit to you. And I think, you know, Gary Trent's going to buy into it. I think we're going to have Precious buy into it. And at the end of the day, I think Scotty's the player with the longest term contract that we have. And then we have his RFA rights. And at the end of the day, like, that's what we need. He's the main piece that we're going to be building around for the next 10 years. By and large, for sure.
Barring a major injury, that max rookie extension will be offered to Scotty the minute it is available to be done. Masai and Co. know what they're doing. And also
No,
we
I'd keep
have
him
all
happy.
of our draft picks. Matt talks about how we're going to need to potentially add people as our older veterans start to phase out, you know. We consider that Thad's going to go in a couple years. You know, Boucher isn't going to be able to just be that guy who's always around. But
And
we
he's
have
sneaky
so
old.
much. He's 28, 29 years old, and I'm
He's
like,
sneaky old.
he's my age basically at this point in time. Crazy to think about. Oh my gosh. But yeah, we have draft capital of our own, and we've always proven that we can do what we can with our own draft picks, right? So we don't need to rely on somebody else being bad to give us a late first round pick, right? So the future is bright for this team, and the Raptors. I just want basketball. I just want to see the boys get together and play. Like, thankfully we have Rico Hines and things.
Dude, next year if we get bounced in the third round or the second round and are drafted 24th overall, who's to say that we can't find another Pascal Siakam or OG Anunoby? Because we've done it before. 22 and 27, I think, were the picks that we used on those. So you average that out, that's 24, right? Like, nailed it.
Absolutely. This guy remembering his math from elementary school. So proud of you, man. So proud of you.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah. But anything else? You got more for the Raptors?
Nah, man, I think we're good to wrap up the Raptors.
I was going to say, we could talk about Jalen Harris being reinstated, but, like, will it matter? I mean, we have first dibs.
Is he going to push the needle?
Could be good. It could be another Terrence Davis situation. So, like, who knows, right?
Dude, that was not good situation. You know that, right? Like, it was not a good situation.
The struggles. All right, well, that's it for me, my guy.
Man, let's talk about maybe a hot take or a mystic prediction for this division. I said it earlier, but I honestly believe, it's going to be a repeat of last year. Dallas, Memphis, New Orleans, all in the playoffs. I'll even say all of them win a round.
Ooh, wow. That would be very spicy. The Southwest takeover at the end of the day, but we love to make takes when we talk about divisions. We like to keep it in the division. Last year I was over here talking about how Ja was going to lead Memphis to the playoffs. He did it handily. So, I'm going to double down. Matt knows I like to double down. It helped me get Brady all the way to a championship. But I'm going to double down on Ja. I'm going to double down on the Grizzlies. They're going to win this division. They're going to get ahead of Luka. They're going to be a top 2 team in the West once again. Ja is here to stay, man. I'm pumped for this Grizzlies team.
Hey, man, I believe you.
Absolutely.
Didn't last year, but do this year.
Man had no faith. He was like, Ja, he had that sophomore slump. He ain't coming back. Well, I proved you wrong, didn't he?
Yeah, I'm obviously dumb. What are you going to do?
Not true. This guy has a lot of intelligence. I can't take that away from you. But anything else this week, my friend? Anything else you got going on?
No, you're good to take us out.
Beautiful. Well, thanks everybody for being here. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Board Sports. Like, subscribe, give us that thumbs up, whatever you need, and check out theboardsports.net for new episodes and blog posts.
And we'll talk to you next time.